believe anything to do with culture is not a sprint, but a marathon. Satish, you're a marathoner. And does a marathoner's mindset, I remember listening to Ajay Srinivasan once, and he talked about 7 things about, which marathoners have. That is good health, wellness, courage, optimism, self-motivation, no excuses, and a resilient mindset. Does being a marathoner's mindset help in building culture? Dada, can you hear me?
Yeah, I don't know whether my connection is unstable or yours, but anyways, I get the question. Am I audible?
Yeah, very clearly.
Okay, good. Like we were discussing just before I think any sport is a good sport and has its own values, so I'll not discriminate between sports. But yeah, like we were discussing that culture building is hard work. And the fact that running a marathon is not everybody's cup of tea, to that extent, I think it gives you a positive handicap. Since we were discussing golf.
Golf earlier.
Yeah, the point, my chairman, to say an anecdote, Mr. Omkar Singh Kanwar, who promoted Apollo Tyres, told me one interesting thing that, we have 16,000 employees, and he says that you might think that you're sitting in your cabin and nice and everything, but 16,000 pairs of eyes are always watching you. And actually, I've used that to my advantage. That advice of so my marathons is that I sort of publicly state my goals and say that this year I'm planning to do whatever I'm planning to do, and that sort of puts your commitment out on the table. And marathon does a lot of things to me, at least a lot of values that come across to me. One is that you have to train a lot. You have to build endurance over time, and I think to that extent, culture is also a journey, as we spoke. It takes, Gautam said that takes 5 to 6 years, 4 to 5 years. So, you have to build endurance. It just happens by accident. I think is a rhythm. You start running to your own music. So you build up a pace, and in any transformation journey, I think when you build up a certain pace, that's the important thing. Then it starts sort of rolling on its own. The journey, the initial part is difficult, but then it starts going its own. And likewise, if you fail in your goal, the only point is that you probably did not train hard enough. And for any journey, again, I would say, not that failing is a bad thing, but then it also tells you that somewhere you had those weak points. So yeah, you can collaborate any sport to culture or to any transformational journey. And I think marathon lends itself to, I use it, like I said, strategically. There are a lot of employees who are joined with me. The fitness culture is not only just dawning in Apollo Tyres, it's dawning in our country. These days in the pandemic, you can see the amount of cyclists that you see today in Delhi roads.
There's a waiting time for cycle. I bought my daughter a cycle on Daughter's Day. There's a waiting time for cycles.
Exactly, Annurag. So that's the point.
I wanted to ask you, Bhaskar, I know we have to bring everyone on. Bhaskar, Indian organization, you work for Microsoft,
values are very closely.
Oracle. What about Indian organizations? Do they really think of Indian-owned, Indian promoters? Do they really think of culture?
So my first job was with, like Mr. Dwarkanath, I was a management trainee in DCM. And again, I think it was the year you were born is when I joined DCM, 1972. And I remember 2 months.
That's why I call you Mr. Pramanik or Bhaskar da.
So before 2 weeks before we were supposed to actually join, they sent us a book on the life of Lala Shriram. And we were told that the day we joined, we had to write an essay on how Lala Shriram has transformed our lives. So you can imagine there were about 15 of us in that batch of management trainees, and we had to sit down and write how Lala Shriram has impacted our lives. So that was my first, initiation into what I would call corporate culture. Now, in DCM, we had a 2-year training period, one of which where we did a combination of classroom courses and on-the-job training. So for example, as part of my on-the-job training, I went to Mavana Sugar Works, I went to Hisar Mills, I went to chemicals marketing, I went to various different units. At the end of every one of those projects, whether it was personal management, materials, or manufacturing, the local general manager, Shriram Chemicals Kota, the general manager had to write your review, and one of the items was your understanding of DCM culture. So I found this fascinating because the culture of chemicals marketing, the culture of Mavana Sugar Works, the culture of Shriram Chemicals Kota, or the culture of Hisar textiles mills were actually very different. And some of it was corporate culture, some of it was basically the way the local leader ran the company. Right? So what the point I'm just trying to make is that in Indian companies, I think the realization about culture was always there. In the case of the DCM group, I think it was in the 60s that they realized that they had to move from a Baniya kind of a management to a more professional management, and that's why they started the management training scheme. So by the time I joined, there was a huge number of people who were really very good professionals, and the companies were doing very well. Shiv Nagar, for example, is from DCM. He was 4 years my senior. Arjun Malhotra, Rajinder Singh Pawar, he was my batchmate. So there's a large number of professionals they had already brought in, and they were slowly changing the culture of the organization to become a lot more professional. And they did this, like for example, I was in the DCM textile. The DCM textile mills at that point of time decided that they needed to increase the value of their products and sell to much more affluent households. They built a brand new mill in those days called Hindon River Mills, which was state-of-the-art from a textile technology perspective. And then they took us management trainees and they took us around 7 cities and did a fashion show called the Spirit of 74. So that was one of my, most challenging experiences of my life when I, ran this fashion show in 3 cities as a 22-year-old. And there were obviously the perks that you were able to mingle around with the models and everything else. But that was strategy. So here there was culture, which was the professionalism. And then there was the strategy, which was about changing the product mix, building a new factory, marketing campaign, etc., etc. So that was DCM. So I think, every Indian company, and I worked for the Tatas for 10 years, specifically with Mr. Ratan Tata. And that was again a different experience, much more entrepreneurial, very professional. I mean, and then if you contrasted JRD Tata with, the Bharatrams, it was, it was such a contrast. When Vinay Bharatram used to be on a flight and come to Bombay, he used to get off, somebody used to pick up his bag, and he'd go sit in a car at the back, stony face, while everybody would scurry to get his luggage and then put it in. JRD would walk out, somebody would greet him, he'd carry his own bag, he'd come to the baggage area. Those days the airports weren't air conditioned. He'd roll up his sleeves and he'd wait to collect his own bag. He'd speak to everybody around him, and then he'd go into the car and he would sit at the back and ask somebody to sit with him so that they can go wherever he wanted, wherever that person wanted to drop. That's the difference. Leadership makes a huge difference on the culture of the organization. So I can talk for hours. I think, the Tatas was a phenomenal. Working for Mr. Ratan Tata was phenomenal. True entrepreneur, extremely high integrity and ethics. And, again, he never supervised. He never managed. He gave you and empowered you to do what was right. And I think he talks about that, in some of his experiences within the company. So it was a huge, I think that the various Indian companies have their own unique culture, and the ones which had the right kind of culture have actually survived and thrived in this day and age.
In fact, during the 70s and 80s, DCM Shriram was the training ground, and it was the most coveted place to join in those years. And Dwarka, you were there, and you started your career there as well. Any fond memories or anything you want to add to what Bhaskar said? And of course, I call you Dwarka for last so many years from the time.
Do it. Don't be formal. We know each other.
I'm saying, from the time it was HMM to GSK today, and I handled Horlicks for so many years in advertising, and I remember you. So, Dwarka, any memories?
I want to be brief, but just to allude what from my perspective and what Bhaskar has said is true. I started my career at DCM 1971. I think I just want to one differentiation among the DCM also. It's again depends on the leadership. I had the benefit of working with Dr. Charatram more than Dr. Bharatram. I see Dr. Charatram's style. He was a visionary. He was head of the game. That was the challenge for DCMs not succeeding, whereas others were so conservative. They believed in core competencies where he didn't believe in core competencies. You have to see head of the game. So his thinking was different. So I was fortunate to be his executive assistant and to work with him. I just want to say two things. I think Bhaskar has talked about it very well. I think when you are talking about the culture strategy, the most key aspect here is the main actor in this is the leader. The tone at the top is important. You may have a great culture. As somebody said, you can show it in your websites, you can display in offices, but ultimately walk the talk, tone at the top, how you think. Dr. Charatram was a visionary. I think, there's no question about it. They may have their own some of the habits which are hereditary in terms of as compared to his father. They were different, brothers were different. But what I want to say is care for people. I would say he has demonstrated Mali to Malik. I know he focused on the CEOs, MDs, business leaders. At the same time, he focused so much on talent. The whole management trainee scheme, he used to review every quarter about the management trainee scheme. And one thing, Bhaskar, I want to differentiate is, according to me, DCM in those days produced more entrepreneurs, whereas Tata Sir produced more professional managers. If you see, because ability to take risk, freedom to act in DCM was much higher. After my confirmation in 72 end, I was running a plant in Usha Sewing Machine Works with 10,000 people. When the day came, he said, lockout. He said, you display, you go ahead. I said, I'm just a confirmed management trainee. Dwarka, you go ahead. I'm telling you, that was the empowerment. I don't think in GSK I got it for many years till I became the head of the department. You understand? So
interesting.
You cannot label, because in Indian companies, they don't have a culture. They have their own cultures. They have their own idiosyncrasies, if I can say. But it varied. Again, it depends much on the leader. They lost it because I was the first guy to start a department called ORTD, Organization, Recruitment, Training and Development, in 1973, when we were not talking about HRD and human capital. So I think these are the things. But where do you lost? When I told him the inspiration he brought in, when somebody said, as I said, your luck starts now, I can never forget. The second anecdote, very quickly, I want to say, when I came back from Lucknow, he called me. That is recognizing the talent and giving the acknowledgement and celebrating the success. Then, my boss, the executive director, said, Dr. Charatram, I want to retain Dwarka Prasad. Monga, he is not Dwarka Prasad, he is Dwarkanath. So these are the small things. What I say is true. Different strokes for different people and different strokes for different folks, as they said. I think what you say, sometimes psychic income is more important than what you give in titles and all that. That's what the culture is. So this is a phenomenal, I mean, in my 50 years career, my first 7 years with DCM, is something, which I can never forget. So the last bit, Anurag, you were talking about the Indian leaders. I worked for 20 years with the Indian leaders and 30 years with the multinational. But I see, if you have the right kind of leaders, like Anarjit Singh, which I work, I find he's more than British in terms of his style, in terms of his. I was surprised in board meetings of GSK, we used to go with a shirt, no jacket. In Max Group, we could never go for a board meeting without it. So I think you can't draw merely because it's an Indian company and a British company.
Sure.
And I think those days Simon Scarf brought in a different culture altogether in India, right?
Yeah. You see, he was another inspirational leader.
He was very Indian as well.
There's an Indian, I think, I just want to end is saying, Bhaskar was talking about the product success in Adela. One thing, the companies have come and gone, but the Horlicks brand, which is 170 years old, remains as it is. It could be with Unilever today. But what it means, the Indian company ultimately made that brand more than the original British company, which says the kind of culture you have, the kind of people and the leadership you have developed.
Interesting anecdotes. In fact, Gautam, Dada, when you were, as a transformation that you did in Times Internet and brought in a huge innovative culture, any interesting anecdotes that you recall in creating this huge change?
So let me define, what's the transformation, because it will help understand my answer better.
Mm-hmm.
So as I said, Bennett Coleman, at that time in 2008 was about 173 years old. When you are trying to build out an internet arm or a digital arm, the digital arm doesn't have any boundaries. Internet has no boundaries. So the first thing that we had to realize is that your competition is not just India, your competition is global. Now, the moment you realize that, you say, then how do you compete with the best in the world? And this is back in 2008. And the best in the world, including the startups that were started to happen in India, were young entrepreneurs, reasonably well funded, trying to do the David and Goliath all the time. So if you look at that problem statement and say, what is that we had to change? We said that we need to be digital native, in terms of our employee base, which was a mandatory requirement. Mm-hmm. Till about 2000, 2008, the CXOs were typically 55, 60 years old. And a conscious decision was made to get all the business leaders to be 35 to 40. People have grown with digital and they don't have to have a secretary to read their emails, at that point in time.
Mr. Dwarkanath, yes, sorry, go ahead. Go ahead, sorry.
Sure.
Sorry,
Okay.
sorry. I was in a trance.
No problem. So, then you had started the funding to come within India in 2008. Flipkart had just started to happen. And a lot of young entrepreneurs were getting into it with audacious goals. They wanted to change the world. They still want to change the world. Now, if you are coming with a DNA which is built on a cash cow, you are not going to innovate. So innovation has to be a primary element of your DNA. Over the course of last 10, 12 years, we have acquired probably about 16 companies. And the 14 entrepreneurs of those companies, 14 sets of entrepreneurs of those companies have stayed with us. And it's the ability of a culture to be able to retain the entrepreneurs, because as many would know, the entrepreneurs stay till their stocks are vested and they are saying, thank you, let me go and do the next. And I think the cultural element, that you give enough empowerment, enough freedom to the entrepreneurs, if that's the culture you are trying to build, is important. I will also address Anurag's earlier question is, you and Satyam live in the Bay Area. How do you actually work? How do you actually make it work? So in the concept and in the DNA, Times Internet is organized of about 40 different businesses. So it's a business of multiple businesses. Ghana is a business in its own right. So is Magic Bricks. So is MX Player. So is Dine Out. In all its entity. We allow the core to be the same, but everyone to have their own culture. So we have multiple cultures. So if we have acquired Willow in US and Crickbuzz in Bangalore, they are completely empowered to color the walls purple, not have to obey by the HR processes of Times Internet Limited, and still coexist and work towards a common philosophy. The role specific to Anurag's question that Satyan and I have decided, and I think it's little deeper than the statement I'm going to use, is our role or our work is to have no work. What that basically means is go after the best talent and delegate the work. If you are found working because you are not doing the delegation, then you are doing something wrong in your roles. And that's how, in 2012, we had 12 companies. Today, we have 40 companies. And the only way for us to expand and still manage a vast level of portfolio is because we have been able to hire some great entrepreneurs, make them coexist in the system, sustain their ambitions and their growth, and then, allow them to coexist with the larger vision of Times Internet Limited, from that fashion. I'll stop here.
And Gautam, I want to ask you a quick answer, and I would welcome an interlude from anyone. See, you're still Times. You have the capital, you have the brand, you have the staying power. What about startups that start? And they're growing very fast. While they're growing, how do they build strategy? Because they're very worried about growth and funding, and they don't tend to think of strategy or culture in the way we think, especially culture. What is your advice to them? And I'd want a comment from everyone, because today's startups are tomorrow's big enterprises. Look at where Flipkart is. Look at Byju's. I mean, still has a long way to go, but I want an answer on that. When they're small, how do they build a culture? Or it gets automatically built on how the founder behaves, acts, leads?
Absolutely. I think that there are two parts to the question. One is Times name or the brand is a double-edged sword, because it comes with a culture. It comes with a brand, it comes with an expectation. So there is that overhang on you all the time, while in actuality you are competing with probably the Googles of the world in terms of your revenue, in terms of simply because you are playing in the ad market, or the Tencents, or the Alibabas of the world. So you have the best and the biggest players from all over, which you have to continuously watch out for and still have the culture to sustain and drive it. Specific to entrepreneurs, since the environment has been changing, the entrepreneurs today, they can be extremely audacious in their dreams. Flipkart had an audacious dream in its time, and started when it started in 2007, 2008. They quickly got funded very, very large. In 2009, 2010 is when the funding started to happen. And as the market visibility started to happen and digital became a reality and e-commerce became a reality, a lot of money started being put behind them. So the audacious goals and the ecosystem maturity are important for a startup to succeed. Today, there are a lot of successful entrepreneurs in India, and the good part of entrepreneurs are they want to help other entrepreneurs succeed, which is universal, whether it's in Silicon Valley or India. I've seen that behavior is that people want to give back, because at some point in time, when they were entrepreneurs, the ecosystem supported them. The ecosystem helped them succeed to whatever levels. So to the entrepreneurs, I think it's continuously getting easier. It was not easy probably when InfoEdge started, but when Flipkart started, it became little easier than before. Today, if someone starts in 2020, keeping the pandemic aside, I think just from a timeline perspective, timelines are getting compressed, And the startups will have a slightly easier job because of access to capital and access to mentors and a lot of experience in thinking about how to take the startups forward. And there are a lot of success stories that are coming, through that. There are a lot of what we call unicorns and decacons that are being created in India.
Proficons, profitable unicorns. Unicorns
Yes.
sound like a pre-pandemic word.
So I'd like to just add a little, because I do a lot of work with startups. In fact, I've invested in about 3 of them, and I mentor about 5. And this is one aspect which I actually focus my attention on, helping the founders to define their purpose, to define their mission of their company, and to decide what are the values which are important, and explain to them why they need to start building the culture from day one. It's just a simple thing about asking them as to what kind of people would you be wanting to hire elicits a very generic response. But if you are going to be a company which is really focused on cutting edge technology, innovation is important, then don't say, I just want to hire hardworking people. You have to be a lot more clearer about that. If you are a company which is going to be very bold, very aggressive, and you want to go out and address markets, then courage as a value must be something which you want to look at. If it needs people to be able to collaborate together, much greater teamwork, because you're working on products or services, which basically encourage that with employees, then you need to. So you need to, as a founder or as a group of founders, start thinking. Not necessary for you to establish the culture straight away, but it is important for you to start thinking of the elements of the culture, what is important to you, and start working on those. Otherwise, most people are just focused on execution. You don't want to, like Gautam mentioned, they're entrepreneurial. So, when you get you get a guy who's 60 years old trying to advise people, how to, get the best out of their entrepreneurial spirits, I stay out of that way. I'm very clear that my job is not to, bring them down and get them to be much more structured. But at least on the area of culture, I can tell them about the pitfalls and guide them in the right direction and help them to discover what kind of culture would be successful for them. It's very critical, very important, Anurag, and I think you asked the right question.
Mahalakshmi, we brought in a bill a couple of years back to have more women directors, right? We had to bring in a bill. We had to bring in a bill so that companies start spending on CSR. But tell me, companies that are male-driven, right from the promoter to the board to the CEO, while they talk of inclusion, they talk of, adopting the feminine side of leader. Tell us, how do you build culture which in some way has equality, but in some way also has more compassion for women? So they need it. Let's accept most women are balancing many things, including husbands, mother-in-laws, children, societal expectations. So tell us, how do you bring that element into the culture?
Sure, Anurag. So before I go there, I think I'm kind of fascinated by a previous question. So I'm also in a trance to kind of pick from your language on the question on...
By the way, Bhaskar, I've been taking notes, which is unusual. So I know. And, I'm meeting your friend Saurabh Banerjee tomorrow. So I know what you did. When you talk of collaborative execution, disciplined, collaborative thing and disciplined execution. I'm taking notes because I'm rebuilding my company, so to say. So this is, for me, this has been something that, is very useful. So go in, Mahalakshmi. So I started thinking about my company while Gautam was talking. So that's why I asked that, I had made that format.
That's the power of some of these conversations, perhaps.
Yes.
So let me actually answer, the earlier question, because, as I engage with a lot of startups, which I've been doing over the years out of passion, I think there are 2 or 3 things. One is perhaps the importance of helping a startup entrepreneurial team understand that they need to keep some time to also think culture. And I think there are enough companies, there are examples, including the recent most we work, wherein lack of spending time thinking of what is the legacy you want to leave behind, kind of detracts as you grow in scale. So I think my submission is it's easier to establish culture when you're a small group of entrepreneurs, because amongst yourself, what works. It becomes more difficult when you're becoming larger, because now you want the entire moss to kind of, have the same ethos. The second bit there is it's even more difficult when you're changing that ethos because of some external volatility. So changing culture is the next level of difficulty. And the most difficult in my limited experience has been when you have to incubate a different culture within a larger culture, So whether it's the Times example that Gautam was alluding to, or, when it was Airtel, very successful, but trying to become global, or getting into Wink, which is media and, closer to digital, it involves so much of having two cultures within a, larger umbrella. So that is the most complex. I would say startups, if you focus on it early, it's easy to address it. To your latter question on diversity, I have a pile of contrarian views. I actually feel that, women on boards, etc. I think eventually, what are we trying to do? I think most companies are really just trying to get a microcosm of the consumers we serve into the board, so that when decisions are taken, the decisions are very close to what a consumer really, really wants. So therefore, I think women, sure, also look at different economic, strata being represented.
But we had to bring in a new law to say we should have more women on boards. So
maybe we need to look at even more laws to kind of ensure we have, all ages on boards and, all kinds of diversity.
Tick marks. Still also, it's a tick mark, dare I say that. Get a woman on the board, right?
From a diversity point of view,
I would keep challenging
it.
Well, I would still be challenging it. And Annurag, I would also take the liberty of saying, look, I think it's very easy to step back and say, women have their responsibilities of home. We need to have extra care for them. I would say if you really have care, why don't you join hands at home? Let's be equals at home as we are equals at work. And let's build an equal society.
BJP in COVID, you know what that stands for?
Jadu Bartan Pocha. My CEO educated me on that, because he's gotten into it. Because I talked to him like this, saying, you want equality, come, let's tell me what are you doing at home, and how are you really building
COVID is the chief digital officer of organization now, but it will also chief transformation officer of many homes in terms of role reversal.
Anyways, I promised to be a little provocative, so I'm just continuing to play the role.
But I still don't do this at home. I do other things which I'm in charge of. Whatever
we need to chat offline, Mr. Batra.
Yes.
On that note, I now call you Mr. Batra.
That's my father, but I'll connect you to him. He'll be 81 on 15 December. But
good one.
Yes.
So, I want to ask, one of the things we talked about earlier, and I think Gautam touched about, was about brand. And I wanted to ask Satish and Mr. Narayanan about this, and the fact that, does culture need to be as unique as the brand?
Well, I think it is both overlapping with each other, in my view. And if you look at our own example of what we stand for, we sort of stand for this whole emotional complete man imagery. That's what the brand has been built over the years. And we've been working very hard to try and see how do you look at the DNA of the organization that resonates with that. So in many ways, we every time we connect, we've done a lot of work on the emotional quotient of our leaders. We're doing a lot of work around empathy and also trying to connect these two so that the expression of the brand remains what it is. And ultimately, when you look at the consumer and the diversity of consumers, in our case, our observation is that many times it is the women who make the decision on behalf of men as to what should look good on them. So, and also we define the personality of what a complete man is, right? So he devotes time for his family, he devotes time for society, he devotes time for his own profession, and yet, he's successful. So I think these are some of the tenets that we also keep focusing on internally to try and see that we remain consistent externally as well as internally. And our strong belief is that it is both, one cannot live without the other. So unless your internal DNA is also wired like that, the brand will not express itself in that sense.
And
It's
Mr.
a lot
Narayan, I
about
like you the most.
authenticity,
You know
right?
why?
I mean, Mr. Narayan, it's a lot about
I
authenticity.
like you the most. You know why? You hired a CEO for one of your businesses who is my MDI junior. So I like you.
Oh, yeah. Thank you.
Satish, sorry.
Yeah, so, I think just wanted to add on this brand promise. The brand promise is really something which is part of your strategy, but it has to be aligned with your culture, because otherwise it's fake. And there are many companies which have actually failed the test because their culture was in complete, opposite to actually the brand they were trying to promote and to promote. And it takes hard work. And I'll give you again the example of Microsoft. When Microsoft said its purpose is to empower every individual and every organization on the planet, that includes diversity. That means not just people who are like all of us, but also differently abled people. So Satya actually mandated that all products from a particular date onwards would have to be accessible by all people with all kinds of differently abled, all kinds of differently abled or differently disabled. Whether you were blind, or whether you were mute, or whether you were deaf, or whether you didn't have hands, or whatever else.
Or if you had hair or no hair.
Hair was the easiest one to solve.
By the way, Mr. Pramanik, God made 4 kinds of people.
What I'm trying to make is that it takes hard work. And these are elements of your culture which you have to change. Previously, engineering used to design products for completely abled people. But when we said that our purpose has changed, then you have to look within your organization and find what are the areas which are missing.
Sunandan, we are already up about time, and there's questions at least we.
No, we'll take that, but let's hear from Satish as well. Dada.
Sue, on this brand question, or?
Yeah.
I think I agree with Bhaskar, what he was saying. That, I don't think it's about uniqueness between culture and branding. It's more about authenticity. What are you outside and what are you inside? If the two are not matching, then there's a problem. And it's not. It's a sham. It's going to fall apart. It's not going to carry on. And also today's day and age, your employees, they need a purpose, like you were saying. What is your social impact that you are creating? What is the bigger purpose? Why are you coming? In pandemic, I'm sure the organizations have got tested on their authenticity. The core values that they profess. And how did they practice those core values during this period of the 6, 7, 8 months and going forward. And that's what they're going to be called out for. And I think it's a big test, and they better be careful as to every step of the way as to how they, really in action their values. So I would say, for instance, in our case, Apollo Tires, if you see, we have a tagline called "Go the Distance."
Right.
Now, it's very much a part of what the organization is. We had thousands of interviews which we did of employees, of customers. Before that, we called ourselves a company driven differently. We also called ourselves unstoppable for some period of time. So this is a tagline which really is the essence of the organization, that we truly believe that we go the distance, we make employees go the distance, our customers go the distance. A lot of journeys, whether it's through a product or through the promise that we as an organization give. So it's all about authenticity, to my mind. I don't care too much about uniqueness. When you're only doing brand, I would say uniqueness to some extent is, but then it's also how you creatively express it, etc. But I think it's really how you express yourself, and whether inside, outside, everything is aligned well. And that's what I would think is far more important.
Absolutely. I think a most fundamental point really, I mean, when I look at candidates, especially senior management, if you are not authentic, everything else falls apart. And I'm lucky to have clients who are fantastic leaders and authentic as well. So it's brilliant to see this. I mean, it's the most fundamental, I think, important and most important thing. What do you think, Mr. Dwarkanath?
Sunandan, I just want to build on this, what Bhaskar and said, what Ms. Satish Sharma has said. I think, as he said very rightly, Bhaskar, I think when you had the purpose, why we are in this business, that itself should manifest and then leads to the brand. I just want to give this one example. SmithKline Beecham said when the mergers happened, we will be in the business of science-based consumer healthcare. And it means our global quest to improve the quality of human life by enabling people to do more, live longer and healthier. You believe me or not, many, as people said, you have a nice statement, purpose, mission and vision statement, but it has no meaning because what you do is very different. I have to appreciate SmithKline Beecham when they created the transformation chain. They said, we mean what we say. What is the first thing they have done? You will be surprised. They sold off certain cash cow brands like Brill Cream, Silver Cream, Yardley Talcum Powder, which are cash cows for the global consumer business. But they said this will not fit into a mission statement because we can't clinically prove this can enhance the quality of human life. This is not science-based consumer healthcare. So let us have it up. It requires a lot of courage. You need to stand by what you say. That is what the authenticity is about. The purpose for which you are existing should in line with the brands. You can't say that we care for health, we improve the quality of human life and start selling liquor and tobacco, right? So, but they have not gone to that extent. They're disposed of. That is the intent which has to come tone at the top. And how you drive it. Sometimes you can draft a great statements, but you may not be able to drive executable mission statements, which what culture ultimately does. Brand is a sort of an offshoot of it. I think it has got a linkage, but it speaks for itself.
Thank you so much. We're about time. We could go on, Sunandan. We should close it.
Absolutely.
Otherwise, we get eaten by people. We're supposed to give time post 8. But I just want to say there are 4 questions. We can take that. And Mr. Dwarkanath, 30 years back, I did use Brill. I just want to tell you that. I tell my kids, Papa wasn't born like this. He had hair. But Mr. Bhaskar Pramanik, I want to tell you, God made 4 kinds of people. To some, he gave hair. Others, he gave brains. People like Sunandan, both hair and brains, and people like me, no hair, no brains. So I'm the 4th category. But we talk about that.
This finds a way.
The 3 questions. First question is to Mahalakshmi from Sonia Sani, who's the founder of Pomelo Digital. She did build a digital agency which she sold to Publicis, and Sonia is now building a employee branding digital agency. So Sonia's question is, companies like Netflix are openly talking about outcome-driven, business, work, and hence no scope for mediocrity. Indian culture has been about passion and compassion. We let people be, even if they're not performing, So I think that's what she's trying to say. What are your thoughts while on the panel that cultural skew was dismissed? So anybody wants to take that?
I don't mind giving it a start. So I would perhaps start by saying, I think there's so many stereotypes about what is Indian culture, right? I mean, if we really look at it, I think we're just creating this big imagery about Indian being all heart and all that stuff. So I don't know if Netflix strategy and the Netflix culture is what will really work in all situations, because they say we're going to hire the top 5 percentile, we're going to work with them, and we don't give them careers. If you're in the top, if you stop being the top 5, bye-bye. Now, would that really work for all organizations at all kinds of life stages? May not be. It is surely working for Netflix, power to them. So I think my first point is, let's not assume that the Netflix culture is the culture to go after, or any culture. So I'm a big fan of your culture has to suit what you're trying to achieve. And therefore there is no copy paste of culture. You got to curate what's relevant to you. And two, I also do not think that India is culturally about passion and compassion only. I think there are enough Indian organizations which are extremely performance driven. Some of them enough to say hire, fire, and get things going, right? So I think it is really about what is relevant to a company and what serves what the company really wants to do in the long term. And I would say, if I take an example of another Indian company I worked with for many years, which was Bharti Airtel, I think they had two cultures within it, and as they went in to become from India to, a global
Africa.
company, they had to Africa. They had to unlearn a ton of things and realize that just because you're a leader in one country doesn't mean you can do a copy paste as you go global. Conscious of time, so I'll shut up now.
And Mahalakshmi, exactly what you said. I was doing a conversation with Akhil Gupta. He said exactly in different words, and he said it in his book. One thing that is coming from the two other questions is, the questions are by Raj Singh, and there's a commonality. Rajiv Shukla and Subir Sinha. They're saying work from home, flexi working. I don't call it work from home. If somebody asked me before February, can I work from home? I would say yes, you can work from home on Saturday, Sunday. It's a joke. Please don't take it seriously. For those who may say I said something which is not appropriate, it's a joke. I hope you have a sense of humor. If you're not, I'm starting a school of humor. You should enroll for that. But work from home has devastated cultures, because the office had a culture. You walked into induction of new management trainees. They don't know what the culture of an organization is. The ones that got inducted in 2020 haven't met their bosses. They met them. They haven't had a meal. They haven't gone to the office. So with flexi homes, flexi work, flexi schools, this work from anywhere. I don't call it WFH. I call it WFA. Work from anywhere. How does that impact culture for traditional companies that really, for them, if I may use the word, presenteeism was very important. Involvement wasn't, but every being present was very important. So I would like Bhaskar, Mr. Dwarkanath, Mr. Sharma, Gautam, everyone's comment. Bhaskar, Mr. Narayan, you can start.
I think this is one of the biggest challenges of the work from anywhere paradigm. It's okay that if it's in the short term, but in the long term, while the flexibility may exist to work from anywhere, the fact is that you do need people to get physically together. You need the ability for leaders to talk to people. You need people to observe other leadership behaviors. That's the only way. I mean, I think it's very clear that we talk about the water cooler culture, but the water cooler is an integral part because people, mingle around there and they share stories. If you think about the culture of an organization, it's not just the values, the purpose, the mission, the leadership behaviors. It's your past history. It's the stories which people tell. It's about your successes and your failures with customers or with employees. And that's what builds a culture. And if you're going to work from home, if you're, and you're a full-time employee, it's going to be very, very difficult. So I don't have an answer to that. But I think that is the biggest challenge which most CEOs and most leaders have at the present moment. They're trying to make with it by using Zoom and other things, but it's not the same as a substitute for really building strong culture.
I think my perspective on this is that it's too early to say, other than the IT and the technology companies who have the ability to still bring together people working from different places. For a company like ours, which is more brick and mortar, I must say that in the last 6 months I have hired a couple of people who joined, and of course you also referred to the MDI guy who joined. And it is sort of finding it difficult for them to really get a touch and feel of what the organization is all about. So there is a real struggle. While we all meet on Zoom and we talk about it, we did our onboarding, but they are really struggling to understand what is this whole thing about and who are the different people. You see only faces, you don't not even see them physically. And so there is a need for us to organize some kind of a get together in between to try and come and let people see with social distancing. But still, it's a very tough task that I am experiencing to relate to culture.
And
Very quickly to answer.
For CEOs and leaders, there used to be something called, when I was in the business school in 1994, called MBWA. I'm sure all of you know.
Yeah.
Management by walking around.
Walking around, yeah.
Shaking hands, talking to
Exactly.
people,
Yeah.
you know. I mean, that has gone away.
Yeah, absolutely.
You see, whether, I just very quickly answer whether it's I know it can slightly vary in a brick and mortar company or technology. The fact remains, I think the touch and the smell and what Ms. Narayanan said, unless you do that, you will never be able to emotionally connect. I think what is culture? Culture is the way we work and way we live. How do you demonstrate that if your CEO doesn't walk in or you don't have a corner coffee table meetings and so on? This is the part of the whole system. I know I just want to, we are talking about the executives and the employees. I go one step further, Anurag. Today, one of the challenges is about the students. One of my friend's son got in a Ivy League university in US, but the question was whether he should go do an online or he should not accept this. Ultimately, it's declined because I will not get this smell and the color of the place. What is the fun in spending an online? See, people are not just work for the sake of only job. I think they want to enjoy the culture in which you have. So it has got a far more implications. I think it's a more emotional one, which forms culture is also an emotional aspect of it.
And the additional aspect is also the cafeteria syndrome, right? So the smell of the batata vada and the whole lunch plates is where the whole bonding happens. So that is not.
I have to tell you a funny story. I went to the Google campus and the Facebook campus in 2012, along with 40 Indian leaders, CEOs of large media companies, and I met the Facebook top, tech guy. He's an Iranian. I've forgotten his name. Tall boy, must be 30, 28. I can't. And he was talking about what he's doing at Facebook. 2012, they are in the same Facebook as what they are today in the numbers in this. And he kept talking about the cafe. Like 30 minutes, he talked about food. I thought he could be my best friend because that's what I do mostly in all conversations. And he said, and I went to have lunch at the Facebook cafe. He's so nice. What is wrong with him? He said, I brought the same contractors from Facebook, Google, they are doing it. So I didn't understand. I said, it's very nice. He said, no, it's not the same as Google. This is not the same. He kept complaining about that. And, that's the culture. Till next day, I went to the Google office and I went to the cafe. And then I figured out what he was saying. Because it was like a multi-cuisine. If you thought of a cuisine, it was there. And it was better than any restaurant you had been. And it was a place where you could see people, 2,000 people dining, chatting. I mean, it was that kind of culture. So you're absolutely right.
Exactly.
Cafeterias are very important places.
Yeah, talking about canteen, Anurag and Mr. Narayanan, I still remember during my college days, I'd gone to Kolkata and met some of my friends in Presidency College. And in that cafeteria, I was having coffee with these guys, and there is this legend right on top, which said, if you drop ash in the teacups, we'll give you tea or coffee in the ashtrays.
I think
I remember when I joined HTA, you took me for a lunch. I remember that lunch till today. I remember when we first met that Sardar Singh, outdoor guy, who always charges for 2 outdoors when he places one. What is his name? He's out of business now. I forgot. You said, we have an issue. Let's call him for lunch. Let's meet him. So you would meet people,
I'll come in with a different.
Gautam,
I'll come in with a different point of view.
Yeah, me too. Go for it, Mr. Sinha.
Sure.
Satish.
See, there is no perfect world, whether it's work from office or work from home. The answer is somewhere in the middle. My bias is to start from work from home and solve for the problems or the gaps that you are missing. For few very, very important advantages. One is you save on the commute time, which is humongous. You can hire from anywhere in the world. You can hire from any tier 2 city. So your opportunity to hire the best talent actually improves. You don't have to have a person in a physical city to be able to hire them. And I'm talking specifically about my industry. And the third is, the issues like pollution, which I am very, very aware of, at least in certain cities in India. Those have to be dealt with because those are serious problems for in-office environment, at a massive level. So starting from work from home and then solving for the elements that you're missing, the social aspects, the coffee table chat, and then come to the right outcome allows for a better reach of talent globally for you, as well as allows them to be much more efficient, in terms of their work. I'll stop here and Maha, over to you.
So I was actually wanting to.
Sorry, I just one sec. Gautam, I wanted to actually check with you and talk to you about your experience with working with Dr. Abdul Kalam. And I think we'll leave it for another day, given the time constraint.
No, go for it if you want to. I mean,
Ma, you wanted to say?
Ma, please.
No, I was just actually wanted to just challenge to say, imagine if this conference or the same kind of a conversation with some industry stalwarts were happening 30 years down the line. Okay. I don't know if, culture, would necessarily be about sitting in cafeterias or the smell of the place. My sense is actually the world is changing, and maybe in some ways, I know one of you all said it, COVID, I think Annurag, you said COVID is the biggest digital disruptor. So let's actually see it as a see what does it mean? It actually means that perhaps now the challenge to all of us as leaders is to say, how can we shape culture, assuming we may or may not have the luxury, of necessarily meeting every day. So then how would a leader really inspire, and how do we build that capability in our leaders? How would really people have those random connections which don't happen because you're bumping into each other at the cafeteria? More than the vada and the tea, it's also those random connections and those 10 minutes of conversation, right? So how can you enable, and with folks like Microsoft and other tech majors, would there be technology like 20 years ago, if I told my mom that we are all 20 countries going to be being able to see each other and talk on a panel like this, she would have said she's lost it.
So she
Likewise,
said,
who knows? people may be able to smell virtually. You never know what's
By the way, Sunandan and me did a webinar where somebody had he uses something called a webinar perfume. Just before he goes to a webinar, he puts on the perfume.
That was in that discussion with Anand Kripalu.
Yes, somebody from Singapore. I forgot his name. But on a very serious note, one of my audience is Rajesh Shukla is saying, "Sir, you represented my question, so let me restate. McKinsey is a culture of high performance and excellence, but is it a culture of joy, or more accurately, why not? Is it an oxymoron? Joy and performance. Is joy and high performance an oxymoron? According to me, not. If you're joyful, it will anyway happen. If you're high performing, it is because you're joyful. Mostly.
Yeah. But it is possible. One of the myths people have is, I have to say about GSK, when you go to campuses, it's a great caring company. But, a performance is not sure. This is a myth people have. If you're very caring, you can't be high in performance. You can be 9-9 in a managerial grade. And one act word which I learned, art of tough love. Tough on issues, soft on people. It is possible. You can be high performance. That's how Microsoft is successful. I suppose so.
And let me tell you this.
It's a myth to say that if you're high performance, you may not be joyful, you may be tough. Performer,
as Maha rightly said, we put these labels on companies, on people. I think it's time to kind of, not have the old notions. We have all of us have. Because that's how we were conditioned. I think it's time to kind of recondition ourselves. I think we'll have to lock it there. We'll take the last word from everyone quickly.
Last thing, on the work from home front, we also wanted Satish to say a few words.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, very much in the Gautam camp, that it really lies somewhere in the middle, and there are virtues on both sides. Of course, we do need the physicality, and we need to see what's going to stick. But just some examples. We used to do sales conferences with 250 dealers. We did a virtual summit of all 6,500 dealers. We've been engaging with all 660 employees, field employees.
Mr. Sharma, the question is, right now you're doing out of compulsion. when you have a choice, will you still only do virtual? Is a question I'd like to pose to all of you.
Yeah, Anurag, I mean, it doesn't matter where the driver comes from. If it comes from compulsion, so be it. I mean, why? How does it matter?
Beautiful point. I love that.
Yeah, I'm doing, something called as obsession with the front line. And when in the physical world, I used to always believe, that everything that makes you successful, you sort of, as you start climbing the corporate ladder, you sort of get far removed from that. You don't meet the front line at all. I mean, so I started off a program called Rendezvous every Saturday. I've been doing the pandemic, done some 21, 22 of these. But I've met people of the organization whom I had never met, or I would not get a chance.
COVID has broken hierarchies. That's another expert. In my company of 300 people, I met people that I would never interact on and off a mail because hierarchies are broken. I think Sunandan...
And at one go and so quickly as well, no? At the same time, and with such speed.
Sunandan, we should get a final comment, Twitter-like comment from everyone and close it. For those who have missed it, watch it on the Businessworld YouTube channel. Next issue of Businessworld. The current is a luxury issue, but we still print magazines and we will continue to. But we're building a digital business, or read it on the businessworld.in site. So we must take closing comments from all of the panelists.
Yep.
Let's start with Mr. Bhaskar Pramanik. Mr. Pramanik, your final comment.
So my comment would really be the culture. Culture is really the how of strategy.
Beautiful. Gautam?
Absolutely. You can't move fast without culture, without having an enabling culture.
Mr. Narayan?
I think the pandemic has completely redefined the way we are talking about these terminologies, and I would wait to pass a judgment on which is more important. It would be time that we revisit all of these conventional theories and wait to see what emerges post the COVID pandemic settles.
Mr. Sharma?
Yeah, my take is business strategy within the scope of culture works best. That's the most
Mr. Dwarkanath?
Culture is the lifeline of an organization.
Okay. Maha, you have the last word among the panelists. And the last word will be Sunandan.
Last word is always you, I thought.
No, last word is Sunandan. My boss is still my boss. He's still my boss.
I mean, my view is be mindful of curating a relevant culture for what you want to drive, because one size doesn't fit all.
Beautiful. Sunandan, what's your take?
Yeah, he always wants
Just
to
trying
put
to
me in
figure
a
out you were
spot. Anurag
giving
Singh
the
is
webinar or not. Or
sorry?
seeing something on your phone that you shouldn't have been seeing. Just want to figure
that was a different webinar we did. Okay. But love the fact you want to put me on the spot. But let me tell you, it's been a riveting kind of discussion today. It's been fantastic. Like I said in the beginning, we have a fabulous panel this evening, all brilliant and authentic leaders to discuss the most important issue of culture. And I think, Anurag, what better way to start our series, Good Company with Annurag and Sunandan. Thank you so much. And thank you so much, everybody, for being with us and being one of the best discussions I've ever had. Thank you, Mr. Narayan. Thank you, Bhaskar. Thank you, Gautam. Thanks for being there at 5:30 in the morning all the way from Bay Area. Thank you, Dwarka.
Thank you.
Lovely.
Thanks,
Satish Dada. Good to see you.
And thank you to the BW team for working on a Saturday evening late and making it happen. Thank you, Maha.